Actually, I think we'll just get going. We'll just get going, and people can come in as we start.
How can I leave? How can I leave it from my mobile? I'll go to the...
Who have we got? Who's asking a question to us? Who can we hear?
How can I leave it from here? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
But how? Well, I am using my mobile. I would like to.
Can you see a red button that says leave?
Oh, I've accidentally muted Igal. Igal, you need to, if you scroll across your screen, you may find a leave button.
Oh, somebody just take him out, put him in the waiting room.
We're live on Facebook now and other areas.
Gosh, I'm reluctant to remove him because if I do, we can't get back in. All right, folks, I'm going to assume that Igal can sort himself out. After a couple of false starts, let's begin again. Good evening. I'm so glad you're with me. As you know, we are having this special event this evening because we are coming up to the triennial elections for the Board of Deputies. It happens every 3 years that the Board of we get the opportunity to elect our representatives to the board. And in preparation for that, we really wanted to have a discussion within FPS, thinking about why do we have representatives in the board? Why does it matter? What does the board do? What do deputies do? To give us all a chance to really understand what the importance and significance of that relationship is for us at FPS. And I have 4 people this evening who, there's nobody really who could be better placed to assist us with that conversation. I've got our own deputies here, Stanley Volk and Janet Tresman. They've both been deputies for a long period of time. We're very lucky to have with us Lauren Keelis, who is the Community Outreach Officer for the board, and who is also a young Liberal Jew of whom we should all be very proud, and LJ Wynick, a founder member of Moisha House, who I think lives with some of our movement workers now, and how lucky we are to have her with us this evening. And also Karen Newman, who I understand is our deputy chair, not our vice chair at Liberal Judaism, although I admit to being unclear about what the difference is. But on our board of national officers, and she is a deputy herself and also the convener of the Progressive Deputies group. So between them, they can really give us a full picture of what it's like being a deputy, what the Board of Deputies does, and how, as progressive Jews, we participate and why our participation is valuable and important. So that's more than enough introduction from me. What I intend to do is invite each to a little bit about their own experience. Is that Janet? Yes, it was Janet. Each to speak about their own experience so that we can get a sense of what it's been like for them to be deputies. Then I'm going to ask Lauren to speak to us a bit about the Board of Deputies in general terms and what it does. And then finally, I'm going to ask Karen to speak to us about Liberal Judaism and our relationship as progressive Jews to the board. Then there'll be time for questions and answers. Because this is being live streamed across open networks, I'm going to ask you to submit questions to me in the chat, and I will ask them, because otherwise, for GDPR reasons, there are issues with permissions of having people's faces appear and be streamed. So at the moment, what Josie is streaming is speaker view only, so you can't all be seen on our open streaming setups. We can see each other, but other people can't see us, and so that's why I'm asking you to submit questions to me in the chat, and I'll ask them at the end. So, with that more than sufficient introduction, I think, Janet, may I ask you to kick us off and tell us a bit about your experience as a deputy?
Well, good evening, everybody. I have been a deputy for a long time, but not as long as Stanley, of course. I was so honoured to be asked by him to join him as a deputy. In fact, secretly, I'd always wanted to be a deputy. I don't even know why now, but I was so pleased to take up the post. And I suppose it's like being an MP. You go along to the plenary sessions. That's usually your first introduction to the board, and you sit with when in better times, of course, about 200 others from all over the country and overseas territories. and motions are put forward, reports are given from what they call the top table, the executive, and recent matters of interest are taken up, and you get an opportunity to speak if you wish to, and in my view, have something sensible to say that will add value to the process. You always begin when you speak at a plenary by saying your name and constituency, and of course, I'm very proud to say Deputy for Finchley Progressive Synagogue. And so the name is on the map straight away. I take part in many debates, and I try to hold the executive to account for the work that's been done or the policy they're about to make. And anything else that crops up. And believe me, anything can crop up, even in the most well-ordered meetings. As a deputy, I have also volunteered and been elected to the Defence Division, which is one of the 5 divisions of the boards. And we deal with defending the life of a Jewish person in this country and overseas territory from cradle to grave, basically. And of course, a lot of that work is in combating anti-Semitism, but it's also concerned with matters of kashrut, Brit Milah, and anything like that sort of thing. I'm just trying to think of anything tangible. I'm also a member of the family law group, which I was co-opted on to as soon as I joined the board as a deputy. And we are family lawyers who deal with the nitty-gritty bit of law concerning family life. That really is from cradle to grave, and deals with organ donation, deals with the marriage laws. I represent liberal Judaism on the family law group. To begin with, I was just an ordinary person co-opted onto it, but to represent liberal Judaism is an even greater honour, maybe, than representing Finchley in the plenaries and in the activities that the board undertakes. I always try to think that before I speak, that I must add value and I must use my skills that I have picked up over several years, both as a lawyer, as a Jewish person, and anything else that I can grab hold of to help. Sometimes I stand alone as the liberal Jew on the family law group. I think I am the only one. In the Defence Division, there are 2 of us, and fantastically, we did the best in the getting elected onto the Defence Division. So there's a real liberal presence on the Defence Division as well as in the family law group. In the main plenaries, we make ourselves known and people aware of the voice of the liberal Jew. It didn't used to be so popular. It was overwhelmingly an Orthodox assembly, but we make our presence felt. And I always say, Janet Tresman, Deputy for Finchley Progressive Synagogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you very much. Stanley, can you tell us a bit about your experience of being a deputy?
I can, thank you. Thank you, Janet. Nice to talk to you. And just to say, I am following the guidelines of Tamara for this chat. The Board of Deputies exists as an elected representative body for Anglo Jewry, and there have been many changes for the better at the board. Now, we've certainly come a long way since the Battle of Cable Street days. I have not sought election to the divisions, but I do join their workshops and prefer the freedom of being the equivalent to, as Janet said, a backbencher. Being an active and regular member of FPS, I've always made a point of getting to know how our members feel on issues such as Israel, the Labour Party, anti-Semitism on campus, etc. So I've been well placed to take our views to the 2 deputy progressive groups that meet regularly. For me, Facebook plays a big part in modern communications, and I regularly post matters of interest on our FPS closed group and the Facebook Deputies Discuss group, which is a platform outside of deputy and board meetings. In a board meeting, speaking time is either 3 minutes or of late 1.5 minutes. My own experiences. Following discussions in our progressive meeting on inclusive strategy, I have given voice at board meetings. For example, during the days of Corbyn, I voiced to invite him to address the board. I was shouted down. As for raising the profile of progressive Judaism, I voiced that the board encourage the Israeli government for more reform representation. Stop press. A reform rabbi has just been elected to the Knesset, but I'm sure there's nothing to do with me. Now about rewarding. As your deputy, I attended Dayenu, enough is enough, with honorary officers and an estimated 1,500 others in Parliament Square in 2018 to protest against the Labour Party's leadership refusal to recognise anti-Semitism in the party. 2015, as your deputy at Brent Cross with honorary officers and others in a boycott for Israel as a counter-protest to the boycott of Israeli goods by the BDS movement. In 2016, a film was sent to deputies commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War in Israel. This led me to organise a very successful FPS event to show the film, acquire Professor Colin Schindler to explain the historical context and good food, of course, plus FPS members who had lived in Israel to talk about their experiences. 2019, with other deputies, I many times counter-protested in support of the Israeli company Ahava in Covent Garden. For many years, with other deputies, I attend the Ajax Remembrance March. The service regularly was part led by Oversholem Rabbi Harry Jacobi. Let's hope this year will include an FPS group. On the last question, it would have been useful to have some help representing a balanced question of statement in 3 to 4 minutes. To conclude, I do enjoy the role of deputy and intend to seek re-election. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Stanley. That gives us a really rich sense of how many different things you're able to engage in on the board. Lauren. I've muted myself. Thank you, Stanley. It gave us a really good sense of all the different kinds of things you've been able to get involved in on the board. Lauren, can I invite you to tell us a bit about the board more generally, what it's for, what it does, what deputies do and how it all works? Thank you.
Thanks so much. So as Jews, I think we like to walk towards debate and the big conversations, and that's what the Board of Deputies is all about. So I wanted to thank you so much for inviting me to this event, and to Tamara and everyone for attending, and for LJ for supporting this. We're so pleased to be working with you to do this. So as Tamara said, and as the poster said, I really am a proud liberal Jew. I was born into the ARC community and spent many formative years as a participant and then a leader in LJY Netzer. So have spent many a weekend having a sleepover in your community, and I'm sure know many of your children and grandchildren. And I am now living with my friends and the current movement workers for LJY Netzer in the Moishe House in Hackney, where we're creating a cross-communal space for young Jewish professionals in the area. So prior to working at the board, I was previously voted as the deputy for Liberal Judaism. So I'm pleased to be here tonight to talk about my experiences both as a deputy and now as the community engagement officer at the board. So some of you may know, some of you may not know as much, but the Board of Deputies is the representative body for the UK Jewish community. So we are the first port of call to government, the media, and all others seeking to understand our community's needs, interests, and concerns. And we really do speak with unparalleled legitimacy. And this legitimacy comes from our nearly 350 deputies, all of which are democratically elected by synagogues and communal organizations from across the country. So I think it goes without saying that without a doubt, this last year has been a year like no other for the whole world, and of course for the Jewish community here in the UK. But for me, the Board of Deputies really represents the best of our community in action. So there's a long list I could pick from, but if I were to pick just 3 things in the last year or so that really show the difference the Board of Deputies makes, I would say the following. So first started a year ago with the coronavirus bill, where we worked with government, the opposition, and the Muslim community to create an amendment to allow the religious freedoms of those who had died from COVID-19 to be respected. So our advocacy ensured that the clause for forced cremation of the deceased was removed. On another note, we like to say we saved Sukkot. So our work with the government department DEFRA ensured that the seized etrogim at Manchester Airport were released and that their stalks were trimmed to meet the new government standards before being successfully distributed across the community. And lastly, prior to this year's Holocaust Memorial Day, alongside our partners at the World Jewish Congress, we met with Amazon, the largest online retailer. Following our successful advocacy, 92 Holocaust denial works were not only removed from Amazon UK, but from 17 different localities where Amazon operates. And in addition to this, more than 850 links to such works have now been removed from Amazon's websites. So some of these things have made headlines, others didn't, but I think they all demonstrate the impact that the Board of Deputies does. So what is a role of a deputy? This elusive word that goes back to our foundings from the Sephardi community, coming from the word deputados. So as Tamara mentioned, we're coming to the end of the triennium, which means that there's a really exciting opportunity for all of our constituent organizations and synagogues to elect their deputies to represent their community. And we're so proud to have a really strong presence from lots of LJ communities from across the country and centrally from Liberal Judaism, and also LJY Netzer is represented. And I'm pleased that I'm in discussion with some other LJ communities that are thinking of affiliating. So if you're watching this, please do be in touch to discuss further. So deputies really do have a vital role to play in our organization. And I kind of split this into 2 parts. So the first part is about representing the priorities of the community and putting these priorities on the national community agenda to help shape the future of British Jewry. And then looking at it the other way, Deputies have a responsibility to engage with their community in the work of the board and to keep their community informed, because the deputies are accountable to you as members of the community and need to make sure that your interests and concerns are being understood and addressed at the board. So deputies really are the power behind all of our work. So their skills, experience, and knowledge contribute to the board's campaigns, projects, and advocacy work. So this ranges vastly from our Jewish education program in non-Jewish schools, our eco-synagogue project, which I know many LJ and FPS are a part of, and also our work with supporting other minority ethnic groups. So most recently, that's been about advocating for the rights of the Uyghur community to the highest levels. And for us, and I'm sure we all agree here, that that's a very important part of being a liberal Jew and being a British Jew. So I've given a kind of, I think, a brief summary of some of the work that we do. And, you know, from 260 years ago, when the board was founded, you know, the board was founded to deal with issues such as Jews not being allowed into certain professions or universities, and issues surrounding the need for people to swear a Christian oath to become a naturalized citizen. And of course, I'm very pleased to say that 260 years, our community is, you know, more vibrant than ever before, but the community issues and discussions have also developed. And that's been encouraging new people to come on as deputies and also more organizations to join, because I think, as we all know, not everyone is expressing and connecting with their Judaism just through their synagogue. And so we're working with other organizations in the Jewish community to get them on board and to make sure that they're representing their members and their agenda. So in our last meeting, just as an example, we have Jamie, the Jewish mental health organization, coming on board to put that on the community agenda, and also the Jewish Vegetarian Society. So it's a really wide range of religious communities and organizations representing different people and different interests. And everyone is coming together to actively work for the betterment of British Jewry. And I think with every new organization and with every new person that comes on board, the conversation gets richer and more diverse and ultimately more representative of British Jewry. So I'm sure that you might be aware, you might have seen in newspapers or seen the live stream to the meetings that we have, that the Board of Deputies does not shy away from difficult conversations. And I know, as a member of LJ, that this is the same for all of us. We really recognize the importance of tackling the big conversations. And I hope that the other people speaking here tonight feel the same, that it's very much because of my liberal Judaism and my liberal Jewish values that I'm proud to be part of the Board of Deputies. And I really do think that liberal Judaism doesn't exist in the physical walls of just in the physical walls of the synagogue, or even the virtual walls of our Zoom. And our Judaism is very loud and proud. And there are people in our communities who I know who are doing exceptional work in the wider Jewish community and in civil society. And of course, my ask here today is, if this has interested you or excited you and you think you have something to give British Jewry and to represent your community, I urge you to stand to be a deputy. So thank you for listening, and I know we'll come to questions at the end.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lauren. That's really helpful, and got us to exactly the point we want to be, because the occasion for this event tonight is that we have this election coming up, and I know that the board has very strict rules about how we need to notify the entire community that the election is coming up. We need to hold a general meeting in order to have the election. We can't it has to be done in a fairly formal way, and they are really strongly encouraging us to ensure that we have as wide and diverse a group of candidates as we can, and that people really understand what the election is for and why we're holding it. So thank you for all of those explanations, Lauren. I'm just going to reiterate for those of you who came late, that because we are streaming on open platforms, on Twitter and on open Facebook platforms, the streaming is being sent out in speaker view only. So right now you might be able to see everyone on the screen, but anyone who's watching on Twitter can only see me. For that reason, for GDPR reasons, to protect you, basically, we're asking that if you have questions to ask at the end, you drop them to me in the chat and I will ask them. So that way your face doesn't get streamed to the world. And I just want to say that now to encourage you to start thinking about your questions, because we're coming last but not least to our fourth and final speaker this evening, Karen Newman, who, as I said before, is Deputy Chair of Liberal Judaism and convener of Progressive Deputies. So Karen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tamara. It's a great privilege to be here, and I want to use my time wisely, I hope, just to add and augment to what your deputies and Lauren has also said about the work of the board. I'd like to start by just saying how I personally got involved. I got involved as a deputy for my synagogue, the Liberal Jewish Synagogue, and I'm still one of their 4 deputies at the board. The first thing I did was join a group that was called the Oxfam Monitoring Group. Oxfam, the board had, in the teeth of opposition from a lot of our Orthodox brethren, entered into a partnership with Oxfam, and there were some people who were dedicated to torpedoing the project, and the Oxfam Monitoring Group was part of the group, the mechanism for keeping the work on track. And it was a baptism of fire, because it is a very atavistic tribal space, I think. I see Janet very strategically and politically not nodding, but I think most people would agree we don't always see the best of the Jewish community at the board, precisely because it embraces all aspects of British Jewry, and as Lauren said, that's where it derives its legitimacy from. However, what that means is there's a special challenge for progressive Jews within the board, because United always has the arithmetic. There simply are more United synagogues than any other denomination, and the progressive communities have to be articulate, out and proud about being progressive, and vocal if we are to maximize our voice at the board. And I also can say, as one of the co-conveners of the Progressive Deputy Group, it's me together with Tony Seymour, who's my Reform opposite number. We get the progressive group of deputies together about 3 times a year. But the main reason for our doing that, as I say, is to try and make the progressive voice count. Janet was talking and Stanley were talking a bit about the work that we do in divisions. So the divisions within the board there's the defense division, which deals basically with the stuff that you would expect the sort of Home Office to deal with. So that's Shahita, that's anti-Semitism, that's, all of that kind of stuff. There's the finance and organization division, this is an F&O mug that was given to F&O members by the treasurer, a personal gift from him, not 1 penny of board money was spent on that, I should say. And that deals with what you would expect. The third division, there's a community division that deals with education, that deals with social action. They're bringing a resolution now around echo synagogues, so it's that sort of area of work. And there's also an international division which deals with Israel. Well, trying to get consensus among Jews on Israel, I have to tell you, I can't imagine how they do that. I've never been on that division. But what I really wanted to say to you now is to underline some of the issues around the deputies being accountable to the communities. Everything we do, it's exactly as Janet said it was. You get up, you say, I'm Karen Newman from the Liberal Jewish Synagogue. So everything that is said in the name of your community. Nowadays, all of our board meetings are live stream across the board's platform. So that's their YouTube channel, website, and all the rest of it. So you can see what your deputies are doing. They are accountable in that very direct way. And also they, as your deputies were saying, they come and speak to the community about issues that we're involved in. But this is the best opportunity. The triennial election is the best opportunity to really raise awareness of the board. And when I first joined the LJS, I mean, I can tell you now, the habit was to put people out to grass as deputies. I mean, you know, you sort of didn't know what they were doing and they were superannuated. They'd been on council and you just put them out to grass as deputies. We can't afford to do that anymore. I'm not suggesting that you're doing that. You've heard how active your deputies are, but there are some communities that do that. And it's really important that we have articulate, focused, motivated people voicing progressive views. Because, you know, I don't want to tell you that the board isn't always just the most constructive Jewish space in the world, but I cannot tell you the dross we had discussing the Jewish Vegetarian Society, the inquisition they faced on their views on shechita. Now, no jokes, vegetarians. How long do they spend discussing shechita? How central is that to who they are and what they do? But if I tell you inquisition, so these are the kind of people that we're dealing with day in, day out. And we need the board to welcome organizations like Jamie, like the Jewish Vegetarian Society. Why? Because 200 years ago, when the board was formed, people manifested the fact that they were Jewish by joining a synagogue. Now, some people do, but some people don't. They're more, you know, they may show up at, you know, JW3 or the Jewish Vegetarian Society. The board's ability to say it represents the totality of British Jewry is precisely by reaching out and making sure it's not just synagogues, it's organizations like that which are embraced within the board. And I should tell you, as liberal Jews, we can be staggeringly proud of the work that Lauren's doing because she's spearheading that. We wouldn't have had Jamie or the Jewish Vegetarian Society. That's the fact that they come is based on outreach work that Lauren is doing. The other thing I need to say about the progressive voice is we can't rely on it staying as strong as it's been recently because Gillian Merron, who has been a fantastic CEO, formerly, as you know, a Liberal national officer, is stepping down. She was made a life peer in January. She's going to be a working peer in the House of Lords, and she felt that was not compatible with her job at the board, and so she's stepping down. We've got an interim director. I mean, the management aspects of that have been very well managed by the board, but it's our job to make sure that her leaving doesn't result in any dilution of the progressive presence within the centre of the activities of the board. The other thing that I want to say to you, and maybe only I can say this of all of you, is that it's election season at the board. So that means that one of the elections coming up very soon indeed is the election for president. Well, now the normal minhag, normal custom and practice is the word I'm looking for. Normal custom and practice within the board is that if you are president and you are willing to serve a second term, that you do so unopposed. That is the normal practice. However, it's far be it from me to say it's because it's a woman, far be it from me to say it's because it's a progressive woman, Marie van der Zyl, but for whatever reason, we have somebody who is standing against Marie. And I would suggest to you that you need, I'm not going to say you need to be worried, I'm not going to say you need to be concerned, I'm not going to say you need to instruct your deputies, you need to make sure that they reflect what you say, but I think you do need to know that this candidate has written a book called To Heal the World, How the Jewish Left Corrupts Judaism and Endangers Israel. So we really need to make sure that Marie is re-elected. It's very important because I don't see how you can be what Britain needs the board to be, which is basically the one-stop Jew shop. I mean, I wouldn't say that anywhere else, but basically, if they want to consult the Jewish community on anything, they come to the board, and it's the board's job to present a unified rational response to what the Jewish take would be on that issue of the day. Now, if we have, as the president, somebody who believes that a significant tranche of British Jewry is not a legitimate manifestation of Judaism, that's a really big problem. So I just give you that as an example of why the progressive voice needs to be very strong. The other elections, which were coming up very in the beginning of the new triennium, when your new deputies are in place, are the elections for who wants to be on the defence, community, international F&O divisions. And the progressive deputies platform, which I run together with Tony, that's where we try and put out in advance to our deputies profiles of the deputies who are running, and we try to get not exactly a list or a slate, but we try to get everybody to put first, second and third, the progressive ones, to up our game in the electoral space. And so far, we've been fairly successful in doing that. I don't want to overstay my welcome, and I do want to get to questions. So I'm going to stop now. But I do want to thank you for this opportunity, and for you, Tamara, for recognizing that communities aren't going to just intuit or imbibe the process of osmosis, that the board is important. You need to create a space to make that case. I want to thank you for creating this space to make the case. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Karen. And it may surprise you to know we actually had a discussion on council about whether or not we should continue to participate in the board and whether we should elect deputies. And we had that conversation because we're exposing all of our, what we call our strategic relationships, anyone we pay money to, whether it's Citizens UK or Liberal Judaism, to this kind of scrutiny, and our charities as well. We've gone through a really a very deliberate process of thinking about how we support our charities. Any organisation we give money to, why do we do it? And why is it important to us as a community? And how does it how do we engage most effectively and get the most out of those relationships? So we've discussed that in council, and I'm really keen that we should take that on as a community and be thinking about that. Why is our participation in the board something that we prioritise, something we continue to do? Why do we pay £500 per deputy per year to send them? We need to be able to answer that question in order to justify that expenditure. So thank you for giving us such a very clear and forceful description of why it's important that we have articulate, focused, motivated people expressing progressive views on the board, as you said. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn over to questions now. We've had a few come in, but please do pop them in the chat for me. Our first questions are actually for our current deputies. So I'm going to begin with this one. Stanley and Janet, I think maybe we'll reverse order this time. So Stanley can go first and then Janet. How do you canvass the broad spectrum of opinions at FPS, and how do you represent those opinions at the board? So how do you make sure you're representing the views of FPS at the board? Stanley, do you want to kick us off?
Well, I think I did cover that in my talk. I do keep my ear to the ground. I mean, the Cafe Ivrea is a very Cafe Ivrea was formed basically for parents dropping children off to stay around and have a coffee and maybe stay for the service. But I joined it. They welcome everybody, and that's the topic changes every week. And I've also always had an idea what people wanted from the board, and convey those ideas, as I said, to the meetings, the progressive meetings when they have them.
Brilliant, thank you, Stanley. Janet.
I also keep my ear to the ground, and I try and maximise my presence in a lot of FPS groups. You know, I talk to all the members of the Rosh Hodesh group. I do go to lots of events of FPS, work willing, and soon I won't have to worry about that aspect. Also, if need be, which is surprisingly often the case, I go to Liberal Judaism for the official line on, for example, the marriages question or organ donation, so that I can very forcefully put what the Liberal position is at those meetings where it's important. in respect of the Defence Division, it's quite a loud group, and we cover many, many topics. I can see Karen laughing. I try and make sure the liberal stance is not drowned out by the so-called orthodox, because most of them are not that orthodox, and they can be frankly quite rude sometimes as well, because some of them are very arrogant in their opinions, and some of them behave very badly. And so immersing myself in Finchley Progressive, as I have done since 1985, does give me a good base and knowledge of where we stand on most issues.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Stanley. I'm being encouraged in the chat to ask you follow-up questions on this along the same sort of lines. So the first one is, would you ever actively ask congregants, either formally or informally, about an issue that's coming up for discussion before the board? Is that something that you have done? Is to consult about an issue that you know will be discussed at the board within the synagogue community?
Yeah, well, an issue that's coming up before the board, I don't think anything's secret about what's coming up the board. An issue that's been going on for some time at the board is the Constitution, and it's been thoroughly discussed over and over again. The committee was put together. I don't want to go into the whole details of it, but it hasn't been resolved as such. It's all to do with the majority. But in anything, yes, I have discussed with members of FPS issues at the board, because it's no secret. I mean, the board's it's live. It's open. It's an open house. It's not a closed shop.
Thank you, Stanley. Janet, did you want an opportunity to respond to that?
Yeah, sorry, the cat wants to join the debate. Come in. I'm just
all
the door
voices
person.
welcome.
I'm just their staff. Yes, the Constitution has been quite a gritty question, and I have asked other Liberal deputies, and I have asked people at the synagogue how they feel about it, having explained some of the issues that have arisen concerning the Constitution. I am very concerned at the moment about this Jonathan Newman standing. He's only just been elected a deputy, and it's quite wrong that he should be standing as president, as Karen said, and his views are absolutely outrageously and they're vile. And we do need to get a movement going on that, and to try and campaign and show him up for what he is. But the work of the board is the protecting the Jew in the pew, the Jew who works for the charity, the Jew who carries on their normal life, and we have to maintain their position and protect them. And usually one is driven by one's liberal intuition on that. Sometimes there isn't time. Something may crop up during a meeting and you haven't actually got time to say, excuse me, I'll just take a poll of my congregation. You have to think on your feet.
Can I just,
thank you. Now, this was not intended to be a canvassing session, and of course we don't know who else may be standing other than our current deputies for election. So, but I'm getting a lot of questions for the two of you, and they are, of course, largely election related. So I will ask them. But I've also been asked. And some of those questions I think will be quite pressing, but I've also been asked by congregants to thank you both for the work that you do and for your service to the community and to the board, and to say how much we appreciate it. So thank you for that. But the next question is, what would you do if you felt that your personal views about a subject were in conflict with where the views of the community as a whole sat in relation to an issue that came up at the board?
That's a good question. Janet.
Oh, thank you very much, Stanley. I would definitely seek advice and seek the outlook. I might go to Rabbi Rebecca. I might go to you, Tamara. It hasn't happened yet, but I would definitely be driven by the fact that I am representing the synagogue, and anything I say is would reflect on the synagogue, because as Karen says and confirmed, we always start from the name of our synagogue and how we got to be a deputy, basically. So I would also, I'm used to being a representative in my work, and I'm used to saying or thinking, this is not my opinion, but, so I wouldn't say that, but I would say, this is my stance. Should that question arise, and I have to take a stance, and I'm not scared of standing up and doing it. I might be bound up with nerves for some reason this evening, and dried up a couple of times, but I would definitely do that if needs be.
Yeah, I think I feel the same. It hasn't ever come up to now, mostly because we've had such wonderful rabbis, particularly the last 10 years with Rebecca, and the liberal views. I mean, I come from an Orthodox background myself. I grew up in an Orthodox background, but my breakthrough was when I joined Northwood. I think it was about 1976, and that was my introduction to liberal Judaism. I joined it because it was geographic. Actually, it was the nearest synagogue to where I lived. But there was no looking back. I joined the choir, and I just couldn't. Any time I return to an Orthodox synagogue, it's so alien to me. I want to go back to the earlier thing about the elections for the president. I'm pretty sure the Marie's position is fairly safe. That's the feeling I get from deputies discuss. In fact, she did actually call me to ask me to nominate her. And I thought, wow, this is a bit of an honor. But then I realized I was just one of 20. It wasn't just me. But I will certainly do it, because it doesn't matter if I'm re-elected or not. I can still nominate her.
Thank you, Stanley. Thank you so much. I feel like the pressure has been on you both, and I want to move away from it a bit and address some questions to our other speakers. And first of all, again, I've been asked by members in the chat to thank you both, Karen and Lauren, for being with us tonight, and all four of you, in fact, for all the work that you put in, and for the examples you've given us, like Saving Sukkot, of the excellent work that the Board of Deputies has done over the last year to protect our ability to live our lives as Jews in the UK. So thank you to all of you. My questions for you, Lauren, and for you, Karen, are what proportion of deputies are Orthodox as opposed to progressive or liberal? And in your experience, how do those differences between different denominations of Judaism function in the board? Does the board work in a united way? Do people fall into sort of sectional groups that are always taking hard and fast positions? What's your so what is the division? What's the makeup, and how does that work and function in practice?
Thanks for the question. I'll give it a start, and I'm sure Karen can probably fill in some gaps. So looking at the numbers wise, it's hard to say exactly, because we also do have now 45 communal organizations. So for example, the deputies representing CST, I don't know what synagogues they're a member of, but looking at the synagogue membership, the United Synagogue membership is just over 50%. So the liberal representation, it is small, but I know that there's good communication and coordination between the other progressive denominations. And I think, I mean, it sounds a bit funny that I was just looking at an email list today, and I was thinking it is actually incredible that we managed to get everyone. Like, we have our first Haredi deputy now back at the board since they left. So there really is a very, very broad spectrum, and we do bring people together, and it's a very unique space when that happens. And I'm sure it won't be at any surprise that isn't always an easy space, but I think when it does work, it works very effectively, and it feels like a very special and important place to be. I just also wanted to mention that there are some issues which maybe fall more under kind of denominational lines, but then there are issues that bring people together across the religious and political spectrum on certain issues. So, and that to be fair is often this social action issues, and to kind of align, you don't need to be a liberal Jew or an Orthodox Jew or a Masorti Jew or a Haredi Jew to care about the environment or to care about the persecution of other minority groups. So there are definitely issues which are more divisive at the board, and there are issues which bring people together. And we try and create a space where everyone is able to come together, and we make sure that happens in the most respectful way possible.
Thank you, Lauren. Karen, can you shed any light on that question for us as well?
Yes, I can certainly try to from my perspective and experience. I would say by and large, in terms of Jewish denominations, the board space has become a lot less tribal. Denominations work together within the divisions. The progressive deputy group itself is a kind of testament to that, in a way that we routinely work with our reform colleagues. For me, the split is much more left and right, and it's much more that kind of right-wing, left-wing view, and that's why the progressives really need to stick together, because sometimes those are the fights that you have. Obviously, 4 Jews, 5 opinions is never more atavistic than it is over the topic of Israel. And Israel is one topic where I think, we can never really reach consensus. And I think the board has a very, very tricky line to follow, because there are some people within the board who think Israel right or wrong. There are other people who feel more comfortable in the role of a critical friend. And there are other people who feel we shouldn't be washing dirty linen in public. You know the way the arguments work. But the point is, I think it's very important to get the balance right between recognizing that even within our communities, there's quite a large diversity of views within that. And so I think we need to tread a fine line between being accountable to the people to whom we represent, which is critically important, while at the same time not demanding that our communities have polls every 5 minutes on topics that's just going to increase division amongst them. What I have found quite helpful is to ask our newsletter editor if I can have, a quarter of a page every 3 months. And that kind of works sometimes, so that then I can save up things that are interested. And then some people do write back and say, well, what about this? And you can get a dialogue going in the pages of the newsletter. But I think by and large, we're less tribal, but we have to compensate for the fact that the arithmetic is always, always, always with them. It is. And that's why we have to punch above our weight to keep level. And sometimes, I also sit on the Constitution Committee for my sins, and that's a very interesting place, because there are some lawyers on there who think what we really need is a judicial review of Clause 6. And then there are other people who think actually what we need is for somebody to work out what makes sense for the board, and then how do you use the Constitution to get there? And that's a very different view. And so even within the committees, there's quite a large disparity of views there. But I think by and large, the tribal issue in terms of denominations, is Orthodox always against progressives? I would say no. And I would certainly say, obviously, I think Stuart MacDonald, the Liberal, one of the Liberal deputies, is a fantastic treasurer, and he has been. He really has restored the finances to a good space, and he's very, very, very credible. But if I look at the panel of vice presidents under Marie, Amanda Bowman's fantastic. And she's from Hampstead United. I'm not going to say she's not right. The job that she does within that division is hugely difficult. And as I say, you learn a lot more as a progressive Jew, things that aren't necessarily important to my daily life. You learn the work that the board does. One of the things that Marie did before she became president was fight with the coroner in Islington about the fact that Jews can't wait 3 weeks until they bury the body. That's not something that we can do. And she fought that fight and she won. And I'm very grateful somebody else is fighting that fight, because that's not something that I'm going to do. And likewise, whether or not I'm about to go out and get some kosher washing up liquid for Passover is a matter between me and my God. But I want to live in a country whereby people who do express their being Jewish by being glut kosher or doing this, that, and the third thing are able to do so. And that's what the board's for. So whether as progressives we need it to manifest our Judaism is not the question. Is, do we want to live in a country where you can lead a Jewish life if that is important to you? And that's what the board does. And I think that difference is important in terms of the tribal question that you ask.
Thank you, Karen. That's really helpful and gives us a real insight, I think. So thank you. We're getting a really good mixture of questions here. So I'm so interested to learn that 4 new organizations have recently joined the board that are not synagogues. So there's a question here about what kind of organizations can join the board of deputies. For example, there's a specific question about small charities. Can a small charity that's not associated with the synagogue but is related to Jewish life, for example, a Holocaust education charity or something of that kind, can they join, and how do they do it? How do you go about it? So that's a question for you, Lauren.
Okay, thanks so much. And yeah, I think, so we, as I mentioned before, we have 45 now communal organizations, and they range in size and they range in location, and some are very new and some are much more established. And I think it's really important part of our democracy that it's not just the largest communal organizations or the largest synagogues in London that we represent. We have synagogues from Aberdeen to Cornwall, and we have communal organizations with 100 employees, and we have with just 3. So yeah, any organization, is actually when an application comes in, I send it right over to Karen at the Constitution Committee to look at. But it is anything to do with kind of our core principles and supporting a Jewish Judaism in the UK is generally supported. I mean, there's more specifics than that, but what I would say is if you are interested, or if you think of an organization that you're a member of that you think should be represented, then please do be in touch. I'll put my email in the chat. And it's very exciting that, for example, one of the organizations that joined is the Friendship Circle, which is an organization based in Manchester, which works with people who have learning disabilities to create a Jewish social friendship group, and they work on kind of disability inclusion in the Jewish community. And I think it is so important, and I'm sure we can all agree here, that it will be one of their members with a learning disability that is the representative of their organization. And with that, our democracy continues to be vibrant and relevant and current and exciting. And, we're hoping that as these organizations come in, doors are opening and conversations are starting, and we're all coming together to kind of work for the betterment of British Jewry, and these organizations coming, I think, are a really key part and very reflective of the health of Jewish life in the UK. So yeah, as I said, if you look on our website, you can see a list of the current communal organizations, and yeah, always happy to chat with people to see if we can bring more on.
Fantastic, thank you. So there's the short answer: is contact Lauren directly to find out how you get represented for your small organisation. It's so interesting to hear the ways in which the board is diversifying its representation, making a real effort to add those non-synagogue groups. And I think people don't always know that it's not just synagogues that are represented. Also interesting to hear from you, Karen, about some of the ways in which the board is changing over time, because I think that's important for us to know. Stanley, I see you've got your hand up. I've got questions in the chat, so I'm going to come to one of those first, and then I will come to you. So this is a question on something that's a very hot topical issue at the moment. Has the board done any work directly with the ultra-Orthodox community in relation to social distancing and vaccination? I don't know who would like to answer that. Is that Lauren? Is that you or for Karen?
Sure, I can answer. I can answer that. So yes, we have been working with. Well, we've been working across the community to organise, for example, meetings with Public Health England. So like Rabbi Charlie Baginski has been having meetings with us and Public Health England to talk about liberal Judaism and kind of all the processes to keep our community safe. And likewise, we've been working with the Haredi community from across the UK on different issues. So one of the things that we worked on was to work as a kind of middleman between the government and the Haredi community to make sure that all of the social distancing guidelines that have been put up around were written in Yiddish. And what actually happened was that the government were keen to do that, and so they were printed and put up in Yiddish, but it was put up in like, I'm not a professor in Yiddish, but not the Yiddish that is spoken today on the streets of Stamford Hill, and more biblical ones. So then we worked to make sure that now, I mean, I'm living right by Stamford Hill, that there is lots of social distancing guidelines put up in Yiddish so that it's accessible for the community here. And yeah, we've been organising meetings between the community and government to talk about different guidelines and making sure that their needs are represented and communicated with, to make sure that the whole community is being safe. So I mean, it started at the start of the virus, when we were making sure that all of the Hevra Kadishas had enough PPE to keep safe, and obviously as things have continued, the challenges have changed, but we have been working continuously with the community here as the different challenges to arise, to make sure that the guidance is well understood and that the community is staying safe.
No, you go, baby, it's fine.
Franklin, can you mute your phone, please? Thank you, Lauren. I've still got questions coming in thick and fast. Stanley, I know you wanted to come back on something, so do you want to comment now, and then I'll come to a couple more questions?
Just very quickly, I'm very pleased, but Lauren and Karen made the point about admiration for Orthodox Jews doing their work. And this is the point, we are sort of to a certain extent a big happy family, and the inclusion now of members who are not synagogues is only a mark, as I said in my remarks, of the changes at the board. The board originally obviously was consisted of synagogues, and like, as I also mentioned, the Ajax March. I mean, I actually am old enough to have done national service, so I was qualified to march in the Ajax March. But gradually over the years, the ex-war, even national service people have died off, and so now, if you're Jewish, you can march. Synagogue, children march, synagogues march, irrespective, and that's the way it should be. As regards for Jamie, I happen to know personally.
Stanley, I think you muted yourself. Can you unmute yourself again?
Yeah, sorry. And it's only right that people like people who represent Jewish mental health are represented on the board, and similar organizations. That's what I'm saying.
Can I just say on the ultra-Orthodox communities, I think obviously we don't have amnesia. They always were a member of the board, and then they left when the board admitted progressive Jews, when they admitted the progressive designations. It was their decision to leave. But I think it's really important that we're trying to reach out to them to welcome them back, because in my view, we have to look at the demographics of this. Whether we like it or not, they are the fastest growing Jewish minority group within British Jewry as a whole, and it attacks the board's legitimacy when it says it speaks for British Jews if a significant minority is not included.
Thank you. I've got another question here about representation, and I'm not sure who's the best person to ask about it, but it's a question about the representation of Black Jews and Jews of colour on the board, whether there are a significant representation of deputies from those elements of the Jewish community. And I'd be really grateful too if you can tell me when we're expecting to get the report from the Commission on Racial Inclusivity in the Jewish community, because I know certainly at Finchley we're really looking forward to getting that.
Thanks so much for the question. I think there is a date. I can't remember it, but I know it's with the printers now. So I think that's an indication that it will be out very soon. So as Tamara mentioned, after the murder of George Floyd, we launched the Commission into Racial Inclusivity in the Jewish community here in the UK, and I'm very pleased for LJ and FPS's support with the project. And one of, I'm sure it will come as no surprise that I know that one of the sections of the Commission is looking at representation in the community and representation in leadership roles. And I can say at the board that we have a Black Jew who's a deputy and one that is an under 35 observer. So that is a change from FPS. That is a change. There's still obviously a long way to go, and we're hoping that kind of following the commission that things really change and that more people come, because it's, you know, all parts of the community need to be represented. And I think the conversation in the community, I've been really impressed about that people are, like Tamara, as you said, we're very excited to hear the report. Lots of Jews of colour and Black Jews came forward with their testimonies to be part of the commission, and we've been working with stakeholders from across the community, even with kosher supermarkets, you know, really with everyone, to make sure that they have their input and they are on board to implement the recommendations from the commission. And I'm sure that looking at representation in all parts of Jewish life, in synagogue committees, in Jewish organizations, in the staff for those, and also I'm sure in the representation at the Board of Deputies it will be covered. So we are very pleased that there has been some progress in that area, but a long way to go before we can all rest.
Just to add to that very quickly, the LGS invited Stephen Bush to come to one of our meetings. He's a really, really good speaker. And one of the things that he spoke about was what he referred to as ashkenormativity, and how this affects a Black person thinking of going into a synagogue, and what goes across the face of the security person in front of the gate, and how that person then approaches them. And so it's things like that which will add up to their experience, and he's very articulate about laying those things out. So you may want to think about inviting him if you've got a program of social action speakers, stuff like that.
We'd love to invite him. Yes, we would. Thank you. And of course, our own Elijah Benjamin is our under 35s representative to the Board of Deputies, which is something we can be really delighted about, I think. So I'm beginning to get some real nuts and bolts questions here about things like, so when and where does the Board of Deputies actually meet? If you are a deputy, how much time does it take, and what does it mean in practice for you? And also, how many deputies, how is it decided how many deputies an organisation gets? So yeah, some really practical questions about representation and how it works. Lauren, can I address those to you?
I actually think my other colleagues will be well placed to answer them.
Okay. My turn to.
I'm happy to come in, but I think, you are the deputies, and I can fill in any gaps.
Okay, so frankly, where do we meet? Well, at the moment online. So when we have plenaries, we meet usually at the BMA headquarters in Russell Square. These are not open meetings. You have to be a deputy or an under 35 observer from your affiliated group to the board. How much time does it take? It takes as long as you're prepared to put into it. So if there's a project going on at the family law group, project going on at the defence division, it takes me a lot of time. It takes up a lot of time. When I chaired an appeal panel, it took up about 4 hours a day for 2 weeks. Actually longer than that, but that's on average. So it depends what you're willing to put into it. All I can say is don't volunteer for work that you cannot take on. You have to stand up and volunteer for what you can do and what's within your skills to do, so that you add value both for the board and those you represent. I can't remember the rest of the questions. I think they were too technical for me to answer.
Well, I think the question was how many members, how many deputies can the synagogue have, and that's like a magic number. And I do recall when I was the sole deputy, I was told we could have a second one, and that's when I asked Janet. And as for the other previous answer that Janet gave, I agreed wholeheartedly. It can be quite time consuming. Usually 8 to 9 meetings a year, normal Sunday morning meetings, but there's other work too in preparation, for answers to the community. And it's an ongoing thing. It's not an easy task. It's a commitment, without doubt.
Thank you.
Just to add to what's already been said, the congregations are dealt with differently as members of the board than non-congregational organizations. Congregations, the number of deputies that you can have is directly related to the number of members that you have as a synagogue. And there's a maximum of 5. So like the massive conglomerate of Edgware and Hendon, they're capped, but it's generally between 1 and 5. Whereas the organizations that Lauren is working hard to bring on board, like the Jamies, like Sadie Farm or something like that, by virtue of the fact that they're a different kind of organization, they're entitled to one deputy, but that deputy obviously can be a member of staff, because if it's an organization, then it's much more important that the person has a feel for what the organization's doing. So there are different rules which apply depending on what the board calls constituency you represent.
Thank you. I've still got lots of questions coming in, and I'm trying to make sure I'm not going to be able to cover them all, I think. So apologies to everyone if I don't get to your question, but I'm trying to make sure that we get a good diverse range of questions. So this is on a slightly different tack. What would the board stand up against a policy by the state of Israel which they thought would be to the detriment of Jews in the diaspora, is a question that I've been asked to put to you.
I'm happy to start with that. So I think it's quite a broad question, so hard to be specific. As we know, Israeli politics, despite there being lots of elections, it is quite a fast-paced democracy. So things change and decisions are made accordingly as set out by the elected leadership of the board. But I just will give you one example that's I think 2 years ago, when our president, Marie van der Zyl, was in Israel and had a meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, who spoke about the egalitarian section at the Western Wall, and spoke about how important it was for progressive Jews, for diaspora Jews. So know that in a situation like that, as one example that came to mind, Marie took it to the highest person to really express and communicate how important it is that our community has access to the egalitarian section at the Kotel. But with all these things, it's we are a democracy. If deputies stand up and say that they think the board should speak out against this, then it is up to the elected leadership to take those opinions on board and for that to inform policy. And if people, if it's felt that it's not a problem for diaspora Jewry, then decisions are made accordingly. And if you look at the live stream to some of the board meetings, you can see that it is a very vibrant place, and there's lots of opportunity for all of the deputies to stand up and make their voice heard, and that is how our policies are informed. So yes, there are cases where the board has criticised decisions that have not been in the interest of British Jewry for a number of different reasons.
Thank you, Lauren. Karen, did you want to add anything to that? Or?
Not on that. I just wanted to add that Janet said that when the meetings are live, you have to be a deputy to attend them at the BMA, which is absolutely the case. You can't get past security if you haven't got your badge. But all of our meetings are live streamed. So if you want to know what the board are doing or what your deputy is saying, all you've got to do is tune in. They were live streamed before COVID, and they will, of course, continue to be live streamed afterwards. I think with regard to Israel, all that I would say is that, like in any democracy, you elect a president, and a lot of time, if that president's in front of somebody, it's the judgment of the president. And that's why this forthcoming election is so important. If you have got a chance, just click on the book, because you wouldn't believe that somebody would write a book with a title about how the Jewish left corrupts Judaism, but it's out there and he's standing for president. And I don't think he would have said to Netanyahu, by the way, guys, I think it's really important, the egalitarian section of the wall. So it's an important election, and I hope that you can just have a look at his book and see what you think.
Thank you. And you'll be pleased to know, Karen, that Stanley led a discussion in Cafe Ivrea recently about the book. So we've had an opportunity to discuss it and learn about those views in the community. So I'm really aware that of our speakers tonight, we have 3 women and a man, and I know that may not be what people generally would imagine is representative of the Board of Deputies or what it looks like. So I'd like to ask you about gender representation, and also about representation of gay, lesbian and transgender people on the board, what that looks like at the moment, how it's changing, if it's changing. Can I ask you to respond to that first, Karen?
Sure. The top table is fairly equal in terms of gender, because obviously we have a woman president, and we've also had until very recently Gillian Maron. I think her last day was literally, it's coming up right now. So our top table was very women friendly, as it were. Stuart, Liberal deputy, is of course treasurer. Edwin Shuker, the chair of the community division, is a man, but of course Amanda Bowman, who's the defense division, is not. So it looks quite egalitarian across the board. It's with regard to the LGBT, I mean, I don't really know what to say about that. I mean, we're everywhere. I don't really know how to address that question intelligently. I think what I would say about that is we shouldn't get too het up about that, because, you know, the presidential candidate may be gay, and I'd still happily garrote him. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, I think we need to not get too het up about that. All I can say is that the board is very proactive about demonstrating the diversity of the Jewish community in Britain. So for instance, when it was kind of an opportunity to profile LGBT people, because, you know, the event that happened a couple of months ago, I was asked if I'd do a couple of, you know, words, and I wouldn't have done it spontaneously. And I did do it because somebody at the board, who may well have been Lauren, actually thought that was you know, that was a good opportunity. So to demonstrate, you know, the diversity of the board. So I think that the impulse to do that is there. I think when it comes to, you know, kind of you know, do we have enough black deputies? No, of course we do not. But that's part of the process. I certainly have been made to feel uncomfortable, you know, as a member of the LGBT plus community in a number of places, but never at the board.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. Sorry, Lauren.
Sorry, I was going to say I'm happy to come in and just provide a little more. I know we're short on time, but it's something that it was me that emailed Karen. It's something that I've kind of taken on as my remit in community engagement to make sure that we are representing minority groups, and the board is a safe space where people from minority groups can come and talk about issues to do with their identity and also issues to do more broadly with community. So I put a link in the group for the LGBTQ History Month campaign that we did, featuring Karen. And for example, for International Women's Day, I used it as an opportunity to create a video for highlighting our female representation and really calling on more young people, more women, and more people from minority groups to stand in the elections, because it's really important that as the representative body that the board looks like the community. And it is an evolving process. And one thing that we're putting in place is that at the start of the next triennium, all deputies will receive diversity and inclusion training. So we really want to make sure that it's not just us saying, yes, we want to be diverse, please come in. We also want to make sure that it's a safe and positive experience. So looking at it from all angles, but also really happy to be in touch with people to discuss more and hear more ideas in this area.
Thank you. I feel I'm getting a group of questions coming together, and I have to address them. We're coming to the end of our time, but I want to give an opportunity to you, Stanley, and to you, Janet, to answer. It's a sort of double-edged question. One of it goes, why on earth do you want to do this? Why would you want to be a deputy? And also, why should we re-elect you? So I'm going to ask you both to be brief. Just because we've got a shortage of time, and also because, as I say, this was not intended to be a hustings, but it's clearly something people want to know the answer to. So, Stanley, can I ask you first, why on earth do you want to do it, and why should we vote for you?
It's exciting. It's an exciting place. There's a buzz about the place. There's a wide diversity of deputies. There are MPs, there are QCs, there are all walks of life. And it's an exciting place, and I do find it very interesting. I've always been interested in politics anyway, so it's a very political organisation, obviously, and I've made friends there. And as I've said in my talk, I've done work at the board, but I've sort of represented as a deputy things that the board approve of, but necessarily in their name. And I always think that there's much work to be done. There's always danger around the corner, always. So let's be aware of that. And passing resolutions very often. The board used to be known as a talking shop. Very much so. Older men, I'll be blunt about it, older men passing resolutions wasn't even hardly published, maybe in the Jewish Chronicle, nowhere else. Even the Ajax marches was never publicized. It just happened something every year after the formal one. So, but now we're much better on the map. We're much more vibrant, and we're not afraid to speak up in public.
Thank you, Stanley.
In the
Thank
street.
you, Janet. I'm going to ask you if you'd like to.
Thank you. As I said, I've always wanted to be a deputy. I am a political creature. But before I open my big mouth, I usually ask myself, can I add value? Is this something I can do and bring skills and experience to what I'm doing? And I, without being big-headed, I think I have added some value in my specialist areas. Apart from enjoying the conviviality and sometimes the downright hostility, it's a fight that I gird myself up to, and I'm able to stand my ground. But I do feel that adding value, particularly in the family law group, and I rewrote the first draft of the rites and rituals in Jewish life, and so made sure that the liberal stance was included in everything there. I felt that I added value, yes, it's just as Stanley says, it can be exciting, although a 3.5 hour meeting on a Sunday morning about the Jewish Vegetarian Society and their ideas on kashrut was actually, I was wondered, what on earth would I say about that to you? But I think Karen said it all. So I want to continue because I think I can still contribute, and it is my way of contributing to my community. of which I've been a member of the Progressive Synagogue since 1985, and before that the other lot, the Orthodox lot. But I think I do better in the Liberal Synagogue because it thinks the way that I do.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you both. Thank you for all the work that you've done representing us as a synagogue to date. Of course, we are in an election, and I feel that I have provided you, as it were, with an accidental electioneering opportunity. And I really want to stress again that this is that we are being very much encouraged by the board to have an open election process, and to remind you that we will be having a general meeting for the purpose of this election. And that if you feel that you are the articulate, focused voice that can represent progressive Jewish opinion and would like to stand for election, you are absolutely encouraged to do so. The way that you go about that is to send a candidate statement of up to 300 words to the administrator at fps.org, so our office email, and you need to do that by no later than April 7th. So I'm picking up from that there are lots of really practical questions people have in the room about what it means in practice to be a deputy. So I imagine that some of you may be considering that option, and that's how you go about it. So
can I just say, tomorrow, as a member of the Constitution Committee, FPS will be asked to demonstrate to the board, because every constituency has asked the same thing. Show us your call for nominations, prove to us that you asked your entire membership, not a small amount, your entire membership. You gave them the opportunity, you did a transparent call for nominations, and that the meeting at which your deputies were elected was pre-advertised as such. You will be asked to demonstrate that. I just want to make it clear the reason that the board is putting pressure on constituencies like you to have this election.
Well, and thank you. And I can see that Lauren is also offering to speak to anyone who's interested and would like to know more and is interested in standing, which is great. Thank you, Lauren. Karen, you'll be relieved to hear that our call for nominations has already gone out to the entire membership, and along with the date of the meeting. So we've given ourselves plenty of time to have a really open process, and obviously scheduling this evening's event was part of the process of really trying to raise the profile of the election and encourage people to participate fully, whether as candidates or informed voters. So it only remains for me to thank everyone who's participated, particularly, of course, our speakers. So grateful to you all for making your time for us this evening. Thank you again, Janet and Stanley, for the work that you do for the synagogue representing us. Thank you so much, Lauren, for taking time in your role as outreach officer to come and speak to us. And thank you so much, Karen, for really giving us such a clear and vivid sense of why it's important for progressive deputies to be participating in the work of the board. It's really wonderful to have you all with us this evening. And thank you, of course, to everyone who submitted questions. I have run out of time. I have not run out of questions. I'm afraid scrutinizing the board's finances will have to wait for another day. But I really appreciate everyone who's contributed to what's been a really lively conversation and a lively evening. Many, many thanks. I'm going to draw this meeting to a close now, and it only remains for me all to wish you Shabbat Shalom for tomorrow and a very happy Passover. If ever there was a time when we all felt the need to escape the narrow places that oppress us and march together into freedom, this is it, and I'm looking forward to doing that with many of you at our communal Seder on Sunday night. So Chag Pesach Sameach, and thank you, everybody, and I look forward to the election. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you tomorrow as well.
My